Jordan Lulich. This is the Lulich Corner, and today we get the pleasure of sitting down with one of our own estate planning and probate attorneys, Shannon Norvig. So Shannon, thanks so much for taking some time from your busy schedule and coming down to share for our audience and everybody who's listening to the podcast that we get to talk all about estate planning.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
It's going to be fun. So I think one of the largest misconceptions that people have when it comes to estate planning is that it's just for the elderly or it's just for the rich.
Yeah.
So is that really a misconception, or is estate planning truly just for the rich and the elderly?
So it's absolutely a misconception. Anyone with any kind of need for a plan. So first off, keep in mind, nobody knows when they're going to pass. Also, estate planning just isn't for what happens when you pass away. So that's the first misconception is estate planning goes much further than that. It also discusses what happens when you're alive but unable to make decisions for yourself or when you need some help. So that can happen to any of us at any given time. We can be in another country. We could be in a car accident and maybe in a coma. We could just be under general anesthesia, in a surgery and not be able to make a decision that needs to be made quickly. So estate planning really takes care of all that. And then, of course, it goes a step further. When you pass away, we want to know what's going to happen to your stuff. And it can be, just your modest home and your personal belongings. It could also be something of great wealth. So it just depends on the person of what they're planning for. But everybody needs a plan.
Yeah.
And when you add small children, you definitely need a plan.
And I think that's like, as a parent, you're a parent, and when I talk to people who have young children, one of the first conversations that I have, when we're talking in a legal setting is like, hey, do you have an estate plan? Oh, well, I don't need that. I'm only in my 30s or my 20s or my early 40s. Well, what do you mean you don't need that? Like, it's so important because, it goes to the heart of their children. It's not about money. It's not about stuff. For me, it's like, what happens if something happens to you and your partner?
Absolutely. And, there's so much that goes into it that people just don't know to even worry about. We don't all get married and buy our first home. Sometimes we buy our first home as a single person and then we get married and, our spouse moves in and we just don't put them on the deed. And we think, oh, no big deal. And then we have a couple kids. Something happens to us. We may have an estate plan that we did not want or did not plan for.
Right.
That's going to, cause our significant other some kind of issue down the road or unnecessary expense. And you don't know it. So the lack of a plan creates a plan that sometimes is just so unintentional and so unwanted. Yeah. So it's really just important to think about it, discuss it, and figure out what you need.
And it's really sitting down and having those hard conversations because, I know I went through it for me personally, with my family. And it is hard conversations because people don't want to think about, these situations. Exactly. Like, you don't want to think about you not being able to be there for your kids and who's going to step in.
Exactly.
Or like you passing away. But I think we see the situations day in and day out when life just brings us these very unusual, rare circumstances. And it's just so important that you spend a few minutes, you have those hard conversations. So your family is set up, your kids are set up if something does happen to you.
Yeah, and it's your whole family and it's, your business. Most young families are working, they may own a business. What happens to that business if you pass? Somebody might not just be able to come in and fill your shoes if you haven't, properly planned for that. So it's so much that goes into it. And, I'm guilty myself. I didn't really think about it until I first got pregnant. And then I thought there's a lot of decisions I want to make sure the right people are able to make. And, just have that security and that feeling. It's so crazy. As parents, we plan so much. We want that security. And yet so many of us forget to do this part of that planning and this part of the security.
So say you have an estate plan, right? Mm-hmm. And you're a young parent. What life events would trigger for you to either get an estate plan in the first place or reevaluate and revisit that estate plan that maybe you have back from when, your parents made you get one when you were 20 years old or 21 years old and just finishing up college? Like when do you revisit it, or when do you get one in the first place?
So, it's kind of those major life events, right? So when you first get married and you start to build a life together, well, you're really going to want to talk about what you own and, who gets what and does your spouse get everything. It doesn't naturally happen all the time, especially once you have children. Definitely when you first get married, once you have a child, a good plan, good, well thought out plan will include future children, but it's always a good idea to just check in because, sometimes wills or trusts are written and they have names versus, groups of people. So if you've done a plan with somebody else, definitely come in and we'll see if that needs to be amended or changed.
Someone passes away.
Somebody passes away. Absolutely. As assets grow, you're always going to want to keep a pulse. And then honestly, it's not just when your children are young. Once they become older, you're going to want to revisit your plan because once they're adults and what, kind of adult they are, there might be more planning that needs to happen at that point because when you plan for an infant, you have no idea is that infant going to be responsible at 18 or, they're going to try to blow all the money day one. So that, you have to plan for it.
So there's a lot of families that have blended families.
Absolutely, yeah.
You have two people that come together. They've got a couple kids from their first marriage, each of them. So you've got 4 or 5 kids all blended together in one family. And then you've got also some other special situations.
Absolutely.
Maybe you've got a child who's a little bit more challenging, or you've got just some special circumstances. Why in those blended family or those special situations is estate planning even more important?
Absolutely. So again, it goes to, Florida statute dictates a lot for you if you don't do that plan for yourself, and it may not be what you intended or wanted. So if you have children from a prior marriage, but you and your current spouse have kind of built everything together, but maybe one of you is only on the deed, you really want to make sure that you check in with a, estate planning attorney and see, does that meet your current needs and goals? Because it could have unwanted consequences that you just don't know about. But also, we come into situations with blended families where we go, what if one of them passes? How do we ensure all the kids are treated equally or maybe not equally or whatever the situation is? And keep in mind, your stepchildren don't naturally inherit necessarily. So if you've raised a child, you want them to inherit, don't just assume they will. And you really don't want to just leave it till the last to die. In and of itself, going to cause hard feelings. Honestly, lack of plan usually causes stress, hurt feelings and potential arguments.
Well, I think a plan allows you to sit down and to express your wishes because at the end of the day, whether you're a son, a daughter, brother, whatever involvement you have in a family, when someone passes, I think people really just want to make sure that their wishes are being honored.
Absolutely.
And even like talking about and having those hard conversations, it's like something happens. Do you want to be cremated? Do you want a burial service? Or does the family have to sit around and try to remember that one conversation that you had 4 Christmases ago where you were talking about it, but maybe situations change and your mind's changed and you don't want to be cremated any longer. And so I always like to think of an estate plan. It takes out the guessing for the family.
Absolutely.
And it allows, at the end of the day, it's what that person would want.
Yep.
And it's a way to express those wishes and it's a way to honor whatever it is that the person wants.
And it's all about honoring the person. And I do find, I tell people this often, when somebody passes away, we almost forget, right? That the loved ones are left behind and they're in mourning. They're emotional. They're, kind of raw. They're in this state of emotion. And they might not remember every conversation that we've had with them. And sometimes emotions lead. And if it starts out in a place of unsure or second guessing, or that's not what I thought was going to happen, and you didn't really lay it out for people and you didn't really have conversations, that's likely going to start the fighting, because people are emotional. They're not thinking rationally. They're thinking more emotionally. And people go, they fight over money. And I always go, no, they fight over the person, the loss. That just... It's not your best self, right?
I think you hit it on the head, and we share the same philosophy because, you look at an estate plan and you're talking about your business, you're talking about your home, you're talking about, a retirement accounts and financial accounts, right? And you're coming up with a plan for that, but that's really like the byproduct of an estate plan. The main priority and the main goal and the main outcome, at least for our team, is to make sure that family stays intact.
It's peace.
It's to make sure because, and you hit it on the head, you talked about when conflict rises, conflict rises when there's no concrete plan and the priorities are not in place. Like you don't when people have to guess. And so I think
everyone's gonna have a different guess, right?
Well, yeah, mom told me this, 3 years ago, and well, I live with mom, and mom said that and this and that and this and that, and then siblings are not talking anymore.
Yep. And that's so sad because you've already lost a parent. Now you potentially have lost a sibling, and it's just unnecessary. This should be a time to allow people to grieve appropriately and maybe even bond with their loved ones instead of having the uncertainty that causes the fighting, which in some cases can last lifetimes and even decades. It can go into future generations even.
And I truly believe that the root of an estate plan is making sure that your family stays intact. I mean,
absolutely.
I think that is the main priority, the main goal, the main outcome. And, the stuff is great, but you want to make sure that your family stays intact even past from when you're alive.
I would go back to our first conversation I think we ever had, saying that the most important thing to both of us was family, and keeping families together and just, our outlook on our own personal families.
So something does happen to you. Who takes over? Like, say you and your spouse you knock on wood, but say you're involved in an accident, you're driving, you're out on a date, and you both pass away. Yeah. Right? What happens to your kids if you have no plan?
Great question. So if you have no plan, it's just whoever comes forward to say, I want to take care of them.
That lost, like that Aunt Betty over in like the West Coast that you haven't talked to in 5 years, she could come in and she could petition to take care of your kids.
Or you could have both sets of grandparents now saying, I want to do this.
And you've got a battle between
them. And keep in mind, you're going to want to have that harmony between them because you're most likely going to want your children to have good relationships with both of their parent sets. But if they've started off in an unknown and then they're going into a court process challenging one another, that's really tricky moving forward. So,
but that can be avoided, right?
100%.
How do we avoid from someone just coming up and wanting to take care of your kids if you and your partner pass away? How does that work?
The best way, and really it's the easiest estate planning document you can really have. I mean, it's not the easiest to decide the answers to, but the easiest as far as to draft. It's a pre-need guardian, and you designate who you would want to become the guardian of your children if something were to happen to you. And most situations requires both parents' signatures. But you're basically saying if both of us were to pass away, both parents, who's going to take care of the child? And we're agreeing. And we go a step further, and it's recorded in the court. You don't have to tell anyone. You don't have to notify everybody, but it's solidified. It's recorded with the court, and it's there for, if something were to happen to you, your wishes already expressed and already recorded.
So what's a healthcare directive, and why should young families consider having a healthcare directive?
I mean, first off, we never know when we're going to need someone to make a decision for you. I go back to my first estate plan was really when I got pregnant, because what if something happened to me? What if I needed medical attention and I'm unable to make that decision? Who's going to make it? Who do I feel comfortable making it? And so having that is, invaluable because you've decided who you trust to make that decision.
So it's not automatically your spouse?
No, not necessarily. Think about it this way. Your spouse shows up and says, I want this. And your mom shows up and says, nope, I want this. Who's the doctor supposed to listen to? I mean, maybe they'll listen to one over the other, but there's a good chance they may say, until you guys agree. There was a case a long time ago, with the coma, and it was the fighting over, taking off or staying on. And at some point,
and parents,
the court
months went by.
Yes. Yeah. And imagine, that situation was very hard, very painful. But imagine it was a decision that needed to be made quickly. That's where it's really hard, because you go, well, what if those people are disagreeing? And that decision can't be made quickly. And so you really want to think about that. And also, if you have young children, you're going to want to make sure you have, quick decisions made for you and less stress, because your children are going to pick up and feel that.
Absolutely.
So.
And what about a power of attorney? Why would young families want to have a power of attorney in place?
Power of attorneys are incredibly important as well. It can be something great. It doesn't always have to be doom and gloom, right? You can be maybe stuck on an island on a long vacation, but you need something done at the bank. If you have power of attorney, maybe that person can step in and help you out.
Yeah. We ended up taking a cruise, and we ended up having to close on our home while we were on the cruise.
So you need someone to sign, and nobody has that authority to sign without you giving them that authority. So it's not all doom and gloom. Of course, there are situations, you know, back to you're in a coma, who pays your bills, who can, you know, manage your finances. So it's helpful, of course, then. It also, you know, we talk about being young and, you know, we assume we have a long life. We also assume we have great health, and those things are not givens. So you could have a situation where you need someone to take over your finances because maybe you have some type of dementia or cognitive issue young. We just never know when those things are going to happen. I mean, it's not for the elderly. It can happen at any age. So just to have that in place, you don't need to give it out. You don't need to let people use it. Just keep it safe, and it's there if you need it. And especially for your spouse, it allows them to really plan if something, you know, unexpected happens. They can still manage things and they can still continue to support the family.
Well, if you're listening to this and if you're a young family, I think the most effective and most beneficial piece of advice I can give you is come out to one of our estate planning seminars.
Absolutely.
We host estate planning seminars every month. They're free. You can enjoy some food. We really make the conversation, we really make the discussion a conversation. We have some humor, we crack some jokes, and we really have a great time at those seminars. I think there's so much knowledge and so much thought and so much perspective that you can get by coming out to one of our seminars and really starting to give this some thought, because at the root of it, there are some conversations that you have to have before you can get an estate plan. And so going to that seminar allows you already start to give some thought and to start having some conversations with your spouse, with your kids, with your parents, you know, people that you want to name in your plan, so that you can really put together an effective plan with people who are ready to step up, are willing to step up and willing to help out and understand exactly what's involved with those different roles. And so, Shannon, I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If people did want to reach out, if they had an estate planning question, what's the best way to reach our office?
So yeah, I mean, you can give us a call. That's the best way to reach our office. Schedule
772-589-5500.
Yep. But you can call, set up a meeting with us. It's completely complimentary, that first meeting. We go over your needs and we really help you assess what it is you need. And so, you know, you just have to make the call and, you know, figure out what you need.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm Jordan Lulich. This is the Lulich Corner, and thanks for listening in. We'll see you next time.